Welcome to the World Base Builder channel. From this point forward on our base build on Titan, we're only going to highlight the major events, either items that are a little bit out of the ordinary or that we have lessons learned from things that went well or didn't go well, and we'll share those with you. So here we are building our deep miner. One of the first things you do in Stationeers when you can is to kind of get out of the resource collecting business. There are plenty of mechanisms and machines that will do that for you. So here we're setting up a deep miner that will basically pull out the resources. Now the one thing to note with the deep miner is that it creates dirty ore. It doesn't actually create directly the ore you need, so you'll have to feed this into centrifuges to separate the dirty ore into the actual individual ores you need. Second item to make a note of here is that it will not mine ices. So on Titan there is no nitrates or oxides or other types of ices. There's only water ice, but the deep miner will not pull up water ice. So you'll still need to find an alternate means in order to continue to mine water ice, which is still important for developing your fuel and your oxygen. And for that we'll create an AIMeE later on, and then potentially find other ways to automate that going forward. But you can see here, that's the dirty ore that is created by the deep miner, and now I'm starting to build the first centrifuge that we will feed that into, and from that extract the actual usable ores going forward. In order to maximize the throughput from the deep miner, you'll set up several centrifuges in parallel. The deep miner produces quite a bit of dirty ore, and it takes a while for the centrifuges to process, especially the electric ones, which are slower. You can use the gas-powered centrifuges, but I don't have a lot of excess fuel, so I'm using the electric ones because that is the fuel supply that I have available. You will have to balance your power supply versus your power demands, but for me the electric ones are good enough, at least for the early part of the game, and if I have to convert them over to fuel later on, I certainly have that option. I've started to set up the larger wind turbines here on Titan. They definitely produce more power. It's about 500 watts during a larger windstorm. As you can see here, it spools up fairly rapidly versus the 200 watts from the smaller upright turbine. I kind of favoring the small just because they have a smaller footprint, slightly easier to make, less resources, although it certainly takes a lot more wiring. I built a total of 4 centrifuges, which seems to keep up pretty well with the deep miner. However, I'm going to continue still doing some manual mining, but I don't want to mess up any of the area around my base. So I'm actually going to create a little kind of manhole shaft that goes downwards so that I can not disrupt the area around the base and basically do some subterranean mining. I'm going after gold and some of the more exotic elements. The deep miner only brings up resources in the same ratio as they may exist on the planet, so it doesn't target any specific resource, and right now I'm in a need for gold. One of the things I found on Titan is that gold, silicon, and cobalt seem to be exceedingly rare, and so you may have to go out and supplement your normal resource gathering techniques by manually targeting cobalt, silicon, and gold. Another technique you can use with the miner by using the R submenu, by pressing the R key and pulling up the submenu. So there's two options, set flatten and set default. If you use the flatten option, it basically will limit you from going downward and will actually align you with the different cells within the world. So you can actually create, corridors and or spaces that have a flat surface at the bottom that allows you to then build on later on, and generally will line up with the same frames as your iron frames and steel frames and wall heights and everything else that the world is built around. So after doing a little bit of ingot chasing, I'm going to go ahead and continue to build some of the more exotic ingots such as electrum, astroloy, invar, constantan, to start building AIMeE. I need an AIMeE because AIMeE will complement the deep miner by being able to mine water ice. I need water ice to power the hydroponics, also to power the electrolyzer so I can generate fuel, and then also from that oxygen. So AIMeE can collect water ices, and that's going to be important going forward. I'm going to use the logic transmitter approach to controlling AIMeE. This is basically where you have a transmitter and a program that runs at a place that's probably a little bit more convenient for you to modify. And then on the AIMeE you just put a blank IC chip and you allow it to run, and your transmitter gets tied to that AIMeE device and will basically run the behavior of your AIMeE from afar. So I'm going to use some code that I've used in the past for other AIMeEs and other scenarios. This actually worked out pretty well for me. I did make some modifications to other scripts that are out there. More specifically, it's around the starting point, but also it preserves where each AIMeE leaves off when it returns to unload and then goes back to that interim location. Also, the randomization for where to go next is both positive and negative for the X and Z. So it basically will slowly spiral outward randomly and look for more resources. I'm capturing coordinates for the unload point, so when the AIMeE is full, it will return to this point and then dump its contents into a chute system, which will then take it for further processing elsewhere. So I just need to capture the X and the Z, update my script to show the unload point, and hopefully the AIMeE will work fine from there. One of the items I've noticed in the code interface in one of the recent updates is that if you have a comment after one of your code labels, so usually used for branching, it shows up as red. So I don't know if that actually affects the label or not, but I've started to remove the comments from there just so that they don't show up as red throughout the code. So if you've seen that, the cause is the comment after the label. So the next thing I do for setting up the AIMeE is find a mining field. So I'm looking for an area that's pretty flat, seems to have a lot of resources, and doesn't have a lot of AIMeE traps, those little pits that seem to form and are perfect for capturing an AIMeE and they can't get out of it. I have it mined here. It doesn't have a lot of other obstructions, so I'm going to capture those coordinates. I will use that as the start point for mining. But as I said, AIMeE will diverge from that area randomly as resources are mined out. But I usually give it a starting point that's free and clear of obstacles. So I thought I had an issue with my AIMeE code, but as it turns out it was just a function of the logic transmitter unit. So the logic transmitter unit is basically your connection to the AIMeE. The code was actually not wrong. I thought it was something to do with the charge ratio, but it turns out that was correct. What it is that there is a switch on the logic transmitter which switches between active and passive. For this scenario, I use it in the passive mode, but each time you toggle that switch, it actually clears the unit that it's connected to. So after you toggle that switch, you have to go back to your unit and use your screwdriver to reset it back to the AIMeE device that you're trying to control. Alright, the AIMeE is responding, that's good, but it does get hung up on a lot of things. Sometimes you have to pick it up and throw it out there into the open field. I'm just kind of tracking here, making sure it goes to the starting point and then starts mining as it's supposed to. I will have to follow up on building the unload point and also a charging system. So I normally put the wireless batteries inside of AIMeEs. That way when they're unloading, they're also charging up. If the battery gets below a certain point, it also returns to that point so it can recharge. But AIMeEs are sometimes problematic, especially if you have their unload point or they're mining anywhere near structures. They tend to get hung up on those structures. So I'm going to probably at some point need to relocate this unload point to someplace out in the open field. Otherwise I'm going to constantly be trying to untangle AIMeE from various devices. I'm looking to set up the AIMeE unload point here because then I could integrate it into the chute system that's coming from the centrifuges and then feed all that into an ore storage and management facility. Here I'm setting up the Omni charger or Omni transmitter that will recharge the wireless batteries that are in the AIMeE, so as it unloads it will charge and then also return here in case it gets a low battery and recharge. So now I've selected this as the unload point, I'm going to capture the X and Z coordinates and then I'll update the code. I'll give it a test, have AIMeE go there, unload. I'm not going to bother completing the chute system until I can confirm that AIMeE can successfully unload and then also return to mining without getting caught on absolutely everything. So there's a quick unload from AIMeE. It just dumps it on the ground because, as I said, the chute system is incomplete. But at least it unloaded, so that part's positive. But as you can see, AIMeE immediately gets caught up on any obstruction that's anywhere in the area. So this may not be a workable unload location. And I have to drag her out into the field and let her go. And she does then behave as expected. But I don't think this unload point's going to work successfully because then I'll have to constantly be coming out here to free up the AIMeE. Alright, so here's AIMeE in the field and its inventory should be pretty full, so it should be returning for an unload. So I'm just going to track it and make sure I can do that in an automated fashion successfully. Unfortunately, it kind of goes straight line to the coordinates, and in that straight line are a bunch of centrifuges. I am pretty impressed with how agile AIMeE is, especially since it seems the small pit seems to trap them. This is pretty impressive that it can actually climb up the side of the centrifuge and over the chutes. But as you can see, this is going to get old pretty rapidly, so I need to come up with a better system. And it does resume after she's on the ground, does go to the unload point, and does successfully unload, so that part works. So the code's working, it's just the location of the unload point is just not going to be feasible. So as soon as AIMeE is finished unloading, it immediately goes straight back to the centrifuge. So apparently AIMeEs have a thing for centrifuges. Another thing I'm going to do is actually clear the mining field. I have the various cargo containers from the rocket as well as the command lander. Unfortunately, you cannot break these down. The only thing I can break down is the rover itself. Now that they've emptied all the filters and tanks from it, I really don't need that either. But the rocket cargo pods are also in the way. Thankfully, they're round, so you can actually push them out of the way and push them out of the field. There are lights on them as well that do serve as kind of navigation when you're looking for your base again. You can usually see those from a distance, but as far as removing them completely from the field, that's just not a thing we can do right now. And apparently AIMeEs really like to land straight onto the Omni charger or Omni transmitter. I guess really needs a charge. And then also you find various ingots that have been blown around. But yeah, here's one of those cargo pods right now that I'm just going to push out of the field. But I will align it so that the little light that shows near the cargo hatch is upright, and I can actually see those from a distance. The rocket cargo pods are actually somewhat difficult to turn over. I thought I had this one flipping, but even with crashing into it repeatedly, which is always a good idea, it still did not turn over. So I will probably just leave this where it is. I don't think AIMeE's gotten hung up on this yet, and after repeated poundings, it's not really moving. I am thinking about relocating the unload point for AIMeE. Interesting thing is on your GPS, when you get to 0, the actual field disappears, so it's just showing a blank X and a 50. So I might try and see if I can set up a unload point out there. What I'll do is I'll come at it from under the ground, that way I don't spoil the mining area and cause basically more obstructions and more obstacles for AIMeE. So I'll try to create an unload point that allows it to get emptied and then handled in a subterranean area. But that's to follow next. So AIMeE continues to find new and interesting ways to get caught in absolutely everything. What I'm going to focus on now is mining vertically downward. There was a lot of ore right near and underneath the base. So I went down 2, 3, 4 levels here, and now that I'm kind of at the bottom, I'm going to start mining horizontally. And for that, I'm going to use the Ogre. The Ogre is not terribly flexible as far as a mining device. It just goes in a straight line, and whatever ore it runs into is what it captures. So it's a very low return on investment as far as mining goes. However, it does create good spaces underneath the surface. So I'm going subterranean here because that won't impact the AIMeE above. It won't create any obstructions. It won't create any more structures for it to get caught on or run into. So it's basically a clean way to expand your base without causing obstructions. And the Ogre does that fairly well. I will replace it after it does one of its horizontal shafts. I'll move it to the side or up or down and continue the mining until I basically create the space that I'm looking for. So somehow AIMeE ended up inside the base. I'm not sure how that magic happens. Anyway, I'm going to run her out and use her kind of as a placement on x equals 0 and z equals 50. This is about the midpoint for the mining field that I want AIMeE to operate in. It doesn't have any obstacles or obstructions, no pits. So this is pretty much ideal for the AIMeE. I'll probably set the unload point up right around there. And then out of curiosity, I went to x equals 0 and z equals 0 and also y equals 0. This is about the landing point where you start your adventure on Titan, so I left a little marker there. But now it's time to go down below and finish setting up the Ogre. Hook up the electrical and then let it run the horizontal shaft. This one I believe is going to run down the z-axis, and then I'll go and find where z equals 50 and then run the x-axis to get to x equals 0. And then from there we'll go upward and try to connect an unload point for AIMeE. So the Ogre is returning from its initial run, and it created 1 ice. So yeah, not a lot of productivity from an Ogre. But it does create a clear, clean, horizontal shaft, so I'm going to just use that for now and send it on its way again. That's the deep shaft. You can actually go down the deep shaft, and it's somewhat sizable. Remember to bring your jetpack with you. But yes, I actually mined right along the side of the deep miner, so there's a little point of interest when you're down underground. So running down the horizontal shaft that's already been drilled, you can see I'm at z equals 50 and x equals 26, 27. So after the Ogre is finished with this shaft going down the z-axis, I'm going to disassemble it and reassemble it here and then run it down the x-axis. So we'll be going from x equals 26 down to x equals 0. The Ogre will go far past that, but I'm just leaving a marker here. This is where I'm going to set up the Ogre when I rebuild it. And then it will run out until it's at x equals 0 and z equals 50. The y will be 6. It'll be below ground a few levels. But once that shaft is complete, then I'll dig upward and create an unload point and a charging point for the AIMeE, which hopefully will be as clear the base as possible, and it'll be able to run pretty much autonomously from that point forward. When the Ogre backs up to its base unit and then sits there with just the teeth kind of vibrating, that means it's pretty much done. It's run its entire horizontal shaft. There's nothing further for it to do. So at that point, I just disassemble it. Normally the behavior would be that it would kick off again and continue down the shaft if it was just unloading because it had filled up with ore. But when it just sits there and kind of chatters, then it's pretty much done with its work and time to disassemble and relocate. So I'm now going to rebuild it here and basically line it up down the z-axis. Doesn't quite line up exactly because the numbers seem to be on the edges of each of the cubes. So it'll be between 49 and 50 on the z-axis, and then I'll run it down until we get to x equals 0. So we set the Ogre to digging along the x-axis, and we're just following it down until we get to x equals 0 and z equals 49. We'll dig out a little alcove here to get to z equals 50, and then we'll start digging upward. The goal here is to build a chute system, so that will be the unload point for the AIMeE, and then also run some power lines up there so that we can hook up the omnidirectional power transmitter so that the AIMeE can recharge as it unloads. And then shortly we'll have the Ogre returning from its initial run. Yeah, here it is coming backwards. As soon as it bounces back to its base station, it'll unload and then start continuing to dig in that direction. It did get pretty far. You can see we have x minus 37, and it started out at about x equals 25. I think by the time it's finished running, it gets down to about x is equal to minus 50, so it's about a 75 coordinate delta between the 25 and minus 50, so it's a pretty long tunnel. Ogres go pretty far. If you're up on the surface, you basically can just about barely see your base. It's not quite over the horizon, but it's definitely in the distance. There's a little bit of finessing here as you try to put chutes and or wires through solid earth. You can kind of line up and use the kind of the hologram ghost image, and you're looking basically for that yellow crosshair when it's showing that it's connected to something else, and then a green at the top where it's disconnected. So hopefully I've reached up far enough from down below, and then from up top, if I've hit my metrics right, I should be able to now reach down using a chute and hopefully actually see it turn yellow where it's connecting with something. And right, oh, there it is. There you go. I was a lot closer to surface than I thought I was. So there you go. This is going to be the unload point for the AIMeE. And it's spot on. It's going to call it x equals 0, z equals 49. So if AIMeE shows up here and starts unloading, the intake will capture all of the ore that she spits out. I'll go ahead and toss a piece of ice here just to see if it actually shows up down there. Although you could actually hear the Ogre down below, so the Ogre may have vacuumed it up. So when the Ogre returns to its base unit, unloads, but doesn't kick off again, that usually means it's run its full course. It's not going to go any further. But you can see it's built a fairly substantial shaft here. It goes all the way down here to minus 96. And since we started at x equals 26, that's 120 coordinate system length. That's a pretty long length. And if you go up on the surface, you'll definitely still be able to see your base, but it'll be in the hazy distance. So pretty substantial space created by the Ogre. The ice block I tossed down here before did get vacuumed up by the Ogre, so I just tossed a piece of silicon down there. We'll confirm that the chute system is working down below, just to make sure there are no blockages or something didn't connect right as we were going through the earth. But here's the end of where that tunnel system is at the x equals minus 96 and z equals 50. And you can see if we turn around that the base is definitely visible, but it's also in the distance, so a very long tunnel. Alright, there's our chunk of silicon, so the duct system is working correctly. I'll go ahead and send the Ogre back down there just one last time. But in the meantime, we'll go ahead and start setting up the power system for the AIMeEs. I'll set up the omnidirectional power transmitter. I do need some additional resources for that, so I'll grab some gold and iron here, build those resources, and then go out and try to wire up the omnidirectional power transmitter pretty much the same way that we did the chute. So we're going to basically try and drill through the ground by using the hologram images for the wires and the cables, and reach down as far as we can from the surface and then go down below and try and wire it up from underneath. So if everything's gone well, we should be able to reach up. Yeah, this Ogre is now done, so we'll go ahead and disassemble it. Put the parts to the side for future use. And now let's see if we can hit that wire. There we go. There's the yellow outline we were looking for. So we will connect this up to power, and at that point the AIMeE can now use that as a dump point and also get recharged at the same time. I do like to use the windowed chutes. The problem is they cost twice as much as the normal chutes. They take 2 resources, whereas the plain non-windowed chutes only take 1 resource. The reason I find that beneficial is just good for troubleshooting the chutes. It's also time to update the AIMeE coordinates. So the unload point is going to be 049, and then I just put 045 as kind of the starting point for the mining. Although sometimes things don't go right and you have to start over and unload and then clean it up. So there we go, 049 and 045, and hopefully the AIMeE works. You may have to reset it. I think I had to go back and restart the actual IC10 because it kept having the same coordinate system as previously, kept running into the building. I think I also had to restart the AIMeE in order to get everything re-coordinated back to the new features, although it took more than one try to wipe the memory and start over. I also didn't seem to like double zeros, so when I put x equals 0, 0, I wonder if that was part of the issue, although then the AIMeE came flying into the base. Alright, let's try this one more time. Okay, that's what we were expecting. So yeah, making x equals 0, 0 does not the same as just x equals 0. Although for some reason it's going straight back to the base, and now it's going back. Alright, I think it's actually working the way it's supposed to be. We'll leave AIMeE here and finish hooking up the wiring so we can turn on that transmitter unit. Alright, AIMeE's inventory is full, and of course it finds the one obstruction that's out here. Thankfully this is a fairly small obstruction. With a little time it finds its way around it and then gets on with the job of unloading. The transmitter is hooked up so it can receive power there, and if we go down below, sure enough we see all the resources AIMeE just unloaded. So that part is working. We'll just now have to hook up the rest of the chute system to some sort of ore inventory control. I anticipate having a bunch of silos down here to capture all of this. I'll probably capture the water ice separately. That's the one thing AIMeE is doing for me. The deep miner doesn't pull up any ices, but AIMeE is definitely pulling up some water ice, which is exactly what I need. So while I go ahead and build that inventory control system, I'll just put AIMeE to the side. Otherwise I'll just have to keep coming down here and cleaning up all of the ore she keeps dumping. But the ice, the water ice, will go into a crusher, and I'll create a liquid system to handle all the water ice for all the future hydroponics and potentially electrolyzers that will turn into fuel. But that's going to most likely have to wait until the next show. One last note here, this is where the shaft that was going down the z-axis ended. Yeah, it went all the way down to, I think it was x equals 27, all the way down to out here in the middle of nowhere. So, z equals 158. And there's the base in the distance. So again, a very long shaft. Something for me to build on in the future. Thank you for watching. Bye.